Good afternoon, and welcome to the CSPEN update for the week ending Friday, May 22nd, 2015. In this video, we're going to attempt to cover a great deal of ground over the last 2-week period, including, first, information specifically related to Wednesday, the 13th of May. On the 13th of May, 2 major things happened that I think you need to be aware of as part of our 5-state coalition. The first of which was an announcement by a number of the senators that in fact the interest rate for student loan interests, for student loans, will be reduced from 4.66 to 4.29% beginning July 1 of this year. A number of the senators touted this, including Senator Burr, Senator Alexander, the chairman of the Senate Help Committee, and others, as an indication that it would save students millions of dollars in student loan debt over the life of their loans, and was a benefit for all students as well as institutions as we look at the rising cost of college education, student debt, and other issues related to the repayment of that student debt. Also, coincidentally on that day, the Department of Education released information regarding their National Center for Education Statistics pilot program with regard to the gainful employment student surveys. This beta test is an attempt by the department and the Center for National Education Statistics to seek information from students as to what their earnings potential is. In the course of releasing the information, the department actually provided the appendix, which includes the 2-page summary of the questions that would be asked of the individuals to respond. Remember, this is a beta. This is only an attempt for them to see how students will react to this information. Some of the questions that I have reached out to the department and hope to clarify in future CSPEN videos is specifically how and to what degree institutions of higher education are going to be involved in this beta test process. As it was written and as it was provided for in the electronic announcement in Dear Colleague, it appears that all of this is going to be run through the National Center for Education Statistics in the department, and institutions really don't have a role. I find that somewhat hard to believe given the fact that the whole reason for the beta is ultimately to provide you, the institutions, with an alternative method to simply taking the information that comes through on the gainful employment median earnings data as an alternative to try and show different earnings potential. More information to follow on that, but know that right now it's basically a 4-question survey. The first question is, did you have any earnings throughout the course of the 2012 and not 2013 calendar year, so it goes all the way back to 2012. If so, what were your highest earnings? What were your second highest earnings? And did you have any earnings that you received for independent outside work? Obviously, the last part of that may be very helpful and very important to a number of our cosmetology portions of the CSPEN network, given the fact that whether they work at home, whether they work as booth renters, or whether they work in other areas that are away from broader employer companies, that information may be interesting to see how it is submitted back from the students. One of the things I found interesting is the department, as part of this beta, is offering the opportunity for a $25 reimbursement as a thank you to any students who complete the survey. And at the conclusion of the survey, they literally say, give us your PayPal account so we can send it directly to you via PayPal, or give us your address so that we can send it to you. Moving on to the most recent week, 2 major things that have come up, and if you stick with us to the end of this video, I think it'll be very enlightening and very important for you. One of the major things that I'll be turning it over to Nick Falvo, who is a member of Ackerman's cadre of attorneys, and specifically an attorney focused on higher ed policy, is his attendance and his reporting on the APSCU oral arguments that took place on Wednesday, May 20th. May 20th was a busy day. Not only were there the oral arguments going on in the morning over on one portion of Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill, but up on the Senate Help Committee, there was also a major hearing that I was spending a lot of time and where my focus was while Nick was over in the courthouse, and that was focused on the Senate Help Committee hearings on risk sharing. As many of you know, going all the way back to March 23rd, Senator Alexander and Senator Murray put forth 3 white papers, and what they labeled them were proposals and concepts white papers seeking additional comment from the entire broad higher education community and all interested parties on accreditation, risk sharing, i.e. skin in the game by institutions, and the notion of public transparency and data information and data collection. Well, As he has done, this was the third in a series of hearings under Senator Alexander's leadership on that particular issue, and we anticipate more will follow in the months ahead. But in this particular hearing, first they had a single panel which included Senator Jack Reed, where he spoke very specifically about legislation that he has already put forward and proposed to try and tie both cohort default rates and the loan dollars in default of any institution to potential penalties and or responsibilities on the part of institutions on the back end. What he's asserting and suggesting is that, among other things, it should be contemplated as to whether or not there should be a set-aside, a reserve fund, or specifically penalties where institutions, depending on their loan volume and default, might have to repay to the federal government some percentage or some portion of those defaults as a way to try and protect the taxpayers, the federal fiscal interest, and the department and Congress from the over $1 trillion which currently resides in student debt. What was interesting, I found, is that while Senator Alexander gave deference to Senator Reed as the first panel and then turned to a second panel which included a number of different representatives from different sectors of the higher education community, as you can imagine, when you started talking to the institutional representatives, there was resistance, but also a good dialogue that took place regarding all of what goes into student loan debt, the ability to repay, the responsibility of the borrower to repay, and other information. Where Senator Alexander concluded in the hearing was still keeping an open mind, saying that Senator Reed and his proposals, and a number of proposals from the Democratic side of the aisle, as well as information that the Republicans are considering, all would be part of the upcoming and pending reauthorization. He re-emphasized the commitment on behalf of the Senate Help Committee to complete a markup of that legislation before the end of the year, and likely the introduction of legislation in September and an attempt to complete that legislation through markup, as I said, before the end of the year. He didn't say for certain that risk sharing would be included, but he did intimate a number of other issues along with the risk sharing concept that he thought needed to be taken into consideration. He talked specifically about the completion rates of institutions and whether or not completion rates needed to be a part of that discussion. He, Senator Murray, and others talked about whether or not there were ways in which to provide additional responsibilities to the borrowers themselves. And also recognized, and I think all of you will be happy to hear, also recognized the fact that the ability of an institution to limit borrowing and over-borrowing was another key part of the process. Moving on, another interesting set of things that happened on the 21st, right after that hearing, the very next day, Senator Alexander and Senator Murray on Thursday the 21st of May announced that they were going to be formulating another group of working groups. 4 of them, in fact, one to cover accreditation, one on accountability, another on college affordability and financial aid, and a final one on campus sexual assault and safety. These are a continuation of themes and mantras that we've heard time and time again, and yet another opportunity to build off of Senator Alexander's previous task force on higher education regulations as they look to get as much information as possible and as much input as possible from the community before they set about drafting their particular pieces of legislation. It'll be important for us to continue to monitor and seek to be involved in the development of these working groups and the outcome of these working groups. And if that weren't enough, just today on Friday the 22nd, the Department of Education also came out with additional information with regard to the need to put forth clarification on the career pathways alternative to what used to be ability to benefit eligibility. The department put forth a 9-page Dear Colleague letter, which outlines a number of information, not the least of which is defining and trying to define what a career pathways program is. As you may recall, in last year's appropriations bill that was completed for the current fiscal year, but that wasn't enacted until earlier in 2015, Senator Murray was successful in getting a modification in the appropriations bill that said that individuals that were enrolled in a career pathways program, which is very much akin to adult learning and Workforce Investment Act one-stop career and adult education programs, would be given the opportunity to re-enter higher education if in fact they met criterion. The criterion included the old formulation of passing of an ability to benefit type test, independently administered or proctored, or the 6th semester and corresponding credit hour, clock or credit hour equivalent, as well as the assurance that concurrent to those type of assessment mechanisms for access to federal student financial aid at the institution and in a program, that all of the other adult learning and adult support structures were also included as a portion of that program. Well, that only applies in about 11 to 12 states across the country, meaning that a number of other individuals across the country in all of the states that don't have currently those programs are on the outside looking in. We anticipate that the Workforce Investment Act and the definitions, which really stem from the Workforce Investment Act on a career pathways program, will continue to guide some of the department's decision making. And in fact, I have yet again asked questions of other department officials and will hopefully be providing you information at a later date on their assessment with regard to the definition of the career pathways, what it constitutes a true career pathways program, and what needs to be done. But for those of you who previously enrolled Ability to Benefit students, and even for those of you who didn't, I would encourage you to look at this. What I would say now, and what I will likely be saying in the future, is do not look at this regulation as an easy path, pardon the pun, to career pathways, because there are a number of very detailed and specific requirements that are needed, not the least of which is very likely recognition by the state, separate recognition by the state, that you are in fact providing a career pathways program through the workforce investment boards and the workforce at the state and local level. So it's not a panacea, and it's not something that can easily be done. But the good news is that nothing in the statute, be it WIA or the provision that Ms. Murray was successful in getting included, precludes us from endeavoring or attempting to become a career pathways. It's just not going to happen quickly. It's not something that you can do overnight. And please don't read over the portions of the regulation that say specifically that the requirements are only if the individual is already enrolled or brought in through a career pathways program. I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to listen to my portion of this update, but now for the most important part of it. The oral arguments from this past Wednesday, May 20th, provided to you by Nick Falvo. Nick, I'll turn it over to you.